You know those families where one kid is basically a superstar and the other might as well be a ghost? Yeah, welcome to my life. My name's Lily, and for as long as I can remember, my sister Paige has been the sun in my parents' universe. Me, just an afterthought. When I was 6, life was actually pretty good. I was the only child and mom and dad weren't exactly super warm, but they were around. Dad would take me to the local baseball field on Saturdays, and mom would help me with my science projects. We weren't the picture-perfect family, but it worked. Then everything changed one rainy October night. I remember it so clearly. Aunt Linda barged into my room, yelling at me to pack a bag because Mom was in the hospital. My sister Paige was arriving 2 months early, and things weren't looking good. Paige was born so tiny, I thought she was one of my dollies. Tubes, wires, machines, everything looked like a science fiction nightmare. I couldn't touch her, and I wasn't even allowed to get close. It was like she was made of glass. The first crack in our family's foundation showed up when they brought her home. Mom transformed our house into a germ-free fortress. Disinfectant wiped out every trace of comfort, hand sanitizer in every room. Bleach became the new home fragrance. And me, one sniffle and I was packed off to Grandma's house or Aunt Linda's place faster than you could say contagion. At first I didn't really mind. Grandma would make peanut butter cookies and Aunt Linda had this endless stash of mystery novels that I devoured. But I wasn't dumb. It didn't take long to realize that I wasn't being sent away for fun. I was being kicked out because my existence was a risk. Paige became the family's delicate princess, and I was suddenly the potential disease vector. I tried to be the perfect daughter to win back their attention. Straight A's didn't matter. I'd tell Mom about my math award and she'd just nod distractedly while feeding Paige her special formula. When I won the district spelling bee, Dad mumbled something about being proud while driving Paige to her flute recital. And then there was the school talent show. I'd been practicing the piano for months learning Clair de Lune because Mom loved it. I was so nervous, but I was ready to make her proud. The night of the performance, Paige had a slight fever, 99.2 degrees. Not even close to sick, but Mom panicked and rushed her to the ER. I performed alone. No one from my family was there. That's when it hit me. Paige wasn't just the favorite. She was the only one who mattered. By the time I hit middle school, Paige had perfected the art of being fragile. One complaint about feeling dizzy day off. Tired from school, Dad would pick her up immediately. Meanwhile, I handled my own homework, packed my own lunches, and learned to stop expecting praise. I focused on my own thing art. It became my escape. I sketched for hours in my room, finding comfort in lines and shades that didn't judge or ignore me. I joined the art club at school and practically lived in the art room. Paige made fun of my obsession, calling me weird and antisocial, but I didn't care. At least my pencils listened. By high school, I was running on autopilot. I got good at keeping my head down and working hard. Joined every club I could manage, aced my exams, and took on a part-time job at the local diner. I saved every tip, planning for a future where I wouldn't have to rely on anyone but myself. The turning point came junior year. I scored a perfect 1600 on the SAT. I didn't even think it was real at first, just stared at the screen like it was a glitch. Heart pounding, I rushed to tell Mom. She didn't even look up from helping Paige with her homework. "That's nice, Lily. Could you keep it down? Paige has a big test tomorrow." My throat tightened. "Mom, I got a perfect score on the SAT. Paige barely glanced over, smirking. "Congrats, genius. Not all of us are robots." That was it. The invisible wall wasn't just between me and them, it was inside me, separating hope from reality. I knew right then that I was on my own. That night I sat at my desk staring at the acceptance letters from top colleges. I knew that if I showed them, it would somehow become about Paige. So I kept them to myself, tucked away in a shoebox under my bed. I didn't need their validation anymore. I was done trying to be seen. I don't think I've ever packed a suitcase so fast. When I left for college, it wasn't just to get an education, it was an escape. A ticket out of that house where I was either invisible or a burden. I didn't even bother with a dramatic farewell. Just a quick hug from Aunt Linda, who drove me to campus, and one last look at the house that never felt like home. Move-in day at the University of Michigan was chaotic but exhilarating. My roommate Jade was this artsy theater major who could turn a pile of thrift store clothes into an outfit fit for a runway. We clicked instantly. She didn't know anything about my family or my past, and I liked it that way. During our first night, we stayed up talking about everything from favorite movies to future dreams. Jade wanted to move to New York and work on Broadway. Me, I just wanted to breathe without feeling like I owed it to someone else. College life hit fast, but I was ready for it. Classes were challenging, but nothing compared to living with Paige. I dove into art history like a woman possessed. I loved every minute of it, the way paintings could tell stories without saying a word. I started a part-time job at a little coffee shop near campus to cover the cost of supplies and ramen. One weekend, Jade and I went thrift shopping in town. While she was hunting for vintage jackets, I found this old jewelry box tucked in a dusty corner. It was full of tarnished brooches and faded earrings. Most people would have dismissed it, but one brooch caught my eye. The intricate floral design looked almost too refined to be a cheap piece. My grandma had taught me a few things about vintage jewelry, and I had a hunch this was worth more than the $5 they wanted for it. Back at the dorm, I did some research. After a few hours of squinting at online guides and comparing hallmarks, I realized I'd hit the jackpot, a 1920s Art Nouveau piece easily worth a few $100s. I posted it online and within a day sold it for $400. That was the first time I felt like I could make it on my own. I didn't just survive, I thrived. I spent that semester juggling classes, work, and the occasional jewelry hunt. My little side hustle was growing and I was getting better at spotting valuable pieces. Grandma would have been proud. Of course, my parents didn't have a clue. As far as they knew, I was just scraping by on scholarships and minimum wage jobs. They didn't visit not once during my first year. I'd call home sometimes, but the conversations always revolved around Paige, her cheerleading drama, her latest health scare, and how she was struggling with her classes. One evening, just as I was getting ready for a night shift at the coffee shop, Mom called sounding more frantic than usual. Paige had been so stressed that she'd flunked 2 midterms. I almost laughed. Somehow it was still my problem. Mom's voice was clipped. "Lily, can you come home this weekend and help your sister study? She's really having a hard time. Mom, I have work, and I have midterms too." She sighed like I was the one being unreasonable. "You know Paige needs support. You're always so good at school stuff." I bit back the anger. Maybe she should study instead of partying every weekend. There was a long pause. "That's unkind, Lily. You know she has a lot on her plate." I just hung up. I was done playing the role of the reliable backup daughter. That was the last straw. I put all my energy into building something for myself. I started hitting estate sales and antique shops on weekends, digging through boxes and shelves for overlooked treasures. My eye for detail grew sharper, and I could almost feel it when a piece was genuine. I learned to research on the fly, comparing makers' marks and signatures like a detective cracking a case. By sophomore year, I had saved up enough from my jewelry flips to afford a decent laptop and some professional authentication tools. I wanted to take my passion to the next level. One day at the coffee shop, a customer noticed me sketching a brooch I was trying to identify. Turns out he was a curator at a local museum. We started chatting and I casually mentioned my hobby. Intrigued, he asked if I'd ever thought of working with auction houses. He knew someone who could use a fresh set of eyes. It sounded almost too good to be true, but a week later, I was interviewing for a part-time position at a small but respected auction house in town. They needed someone meticulous to catalog and evaluate estate jewelry. The pay wasn't amazing, but I didn't care. I was finally doing something that felt real. It was at that job that I first heard about the Denton collection, a massive estate filled with worthless trinkets according to my supervisor. My curiosity got the best of me, and I asked if I could take a look. When I finally saw the collection, I almost laughed. A mountain of so-called costume jewelry piled in boxes, all dusty and ignored. One piece immediately stood out, a simple gold pendant with a delicate engraving. It was so understated that most people would have dismissed it. But I'd seen something similar in one of Grandma's old guides. I convinced my boss to let me research it. That night, hunched over my laptop in the dorm, I couldn't stop digging. I checked old auction records, contacted a few experts online, and finally confirmed it, a Victorian mourning locket crafted by a famous jeweler and worth at least $12,000. I presented my findings the next day, complete with documents and comparisons. My supervisor just stared at me. "You're serious?" "Yes, it's genuine." That sale earned the auction house a small fortune, and me, I got a reputation. Suddenly, people trusted my judgment. I started handling more high-profile collections, making connections, and even consulting on the side. My little hobby had transformed into a career, and I didn't even see it coming. I never told my parents about any of it. Why bother? They never asked. One evening during a rare call with Mom, she casually mentioned that Paige was considering switching majors again. "Your sister's still trying to find her path," Mom said with a sigh. I couldn't help but smirk. I'd already found mine and they had no idea. As my jewelry side hustle picked up speed, I realized I was onto something bigger than I had imagined. What started as a few lucky finds at thrift stores and estate sales had become a full-fledged passion. I started learning everything I could about gemology, hallmark identification, and the history of fine jewelry. I'd spend my nights surrounded by textbooks, online forums, and auction catalogs, my laptop glowing like a lighthouse in my cramped dorm room. By the time I graduated, my tiny dorm operation had grown into a proper business. I registered it under a simple name. Hidden Heirlooms felt fitting for something built in the shadows. I rented a small, dusty office above a pizza place in town. The rent was cheap and the smell of pepperoni kind of grew on me. My first big break came unexpectedly. I was doing a routine appraisal for a local antique dealer when I came across a brooch that caught my eye. It looked like cheap costume jewelry, but the weight was all wrong. I flipped it over and spotted a tiny, almost invisible hallmark. My heart raced as I realized it matched a famous French designer's mark from the 1920s. I stayed up all night verifying it, digging through old archives and reaching out to contacts I'd made online. When I presented my findings to the dealer, his jaw dropped. He'd almost sold it for a few $100s, but after my authentication, it went for $30,000 at auction. The dealer sent me a massive bouquet the next day along with a check that covered 3 months of rent. That sale put me on the map. Suddenly, I was the jewelry whisperer among local dealers, collectors, and even some high-profile clients. I upgraded my office, hired an assistant, and invested in professional-grade equipment. I kept my parents completely in the dark. They still thought I was struggling in some entry-level position at a museum, scraping by on ramen and thrift store sweaters. I didn't correct them. It was easier that way. Paige, meanwhile, had changed majors 3 times, burned through 2 boyfriends, and nearly flunked out of college twice. Mom still called me, but our conversations felt more like status reports on Paige's latest crisis. Paige is thinking about grad school, she'd say, like it was the most exciting thing in the world. Good for her, I'd respond, biting my tongue to keep from laughing. I'd just closed a deal for a rare Victorian diamond choker that netted me more than my parents' annual salaries combined. The turning point came when I stumbled upon the Barlow collection, a massive estate from an old money family. They were auctioning off a lifetime's worth of jewelry, including a few pieces they believed were just sentimental trinkets. One piece, a seemingly simple pendant, stood out. It was beautiful but too heavy to be mere costume jewelry. I spent the next 2 weeks researching it, cross-referencing hallmarks, and even paying for a private consultation with a European expert. My hunch paid off. It was an original piece from a renowned Russian jeweler thought lost after World War I. The piece ended up selling for over $250,000, and my commission check was enough to buy a small house. Still, I played the part of the struggling art historian when I visited my parents. At Sunday dinners, I'd sit there nodding along as Paige bragged about her influencer plans and side hustles, selling discount skincare on Instagram. Mom would occasionally ask if I needed money, which I always politely declined. "You're so independent, Lily," she'd say, clearly proud of herself for raising a daughter who didn't need her. I'd just smile and push my plate around, knowing full well that my savings account was swelling faster than Paige's TikTok follower count. Then came the first real test of my patience. One Sunday, Mom casually mentioned that Paige was considering a luxury brand internship. I nearly choked on my water. My business had just been featured in a major lifestyle magazine, and I was scheduled to speak at a private event for high-profile collectors in New York the following month. But of course, the spotlight had to stay on Paige. Paige, sitting across from me, smirked. "You should come work for me one day, Lily. You know, when you're done playing with old junk." I felt a surge of anger but forced myself to smile. "Sure, Paige. Let me know when you can afford my rates." She blinked, clearly thrown off by my tone, but recovered quickly. "Don't worry, I'll give you a family discount." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. That night, I went back to my apartment, sat down at my custom-made mahogany desk, and ran my fingers over a vintage Cartier bracelet I'd just authenticated for a client. I poured myself a glass of wine and toasted to the secret empire I was quietly building. The next few months were a blur of flights deals and late-night phone calls. I expanded my business, hired 2 more employees, and opened a second office in Chicago. My name started popping up in the right circles, and my client list grew to include some seriously high-profile names. Meanwhile, my parents still thought I was working part-time at a museum and struggling to make rent. It became a kind of private joke, a little secret I shared with no one. But I knew it couldn't stay hidden forever. Things really started to change for me about 2 years into running my business. I'd opened a second office in Chicago, hired a small but brilliant team, and even started doing guest lectures at universities on antique jewelry authentication. My little side hustle had transformed into a full-blown empire, but my family still had no idea. Mom kept talking about Paige like she was a royal heiress. Paige is thinking about starting her own fashion line, she'd say over the phone, like it was the most exciting news in the world. I'd just smile and let her ramble, usually while finalizing a six-figure deal or inspecting a diamond necklace that probably cost more than their house. It was almost fun, the secret life I was leading. But then Thanksgiving rolled around and everything cracked wide open. It started innocently enough. Mom called me 2 weeks before the holiday, sounding more frazzled than usual. She'd thrown out her back and was panicking about cooking for 20 people. I offered to handle the catering, genuinely trying to help for once. "Oh, Lily, that's sweet, but we can't afford a caterer," she said, her voice tinged with that familiar condescension. I laughed. "Don't worry about it, Mom. I've been saving up." There was a long pause. "You're not going into debt for this, are you?" "Of course not, Mom," I replied, resisting the urge to tell her my monthly earnings made their mortgage look like a utility bill. I arranged for a top-tier catering company I'd used for my client events. They specialized in high-end Instagram-worthy spreads, think maple-glazed duck truffle risotto, and desserts that looked like tiny pieces of art. It cost more than my parents thought I made in a year, but I didn't care. I was curious to see if they'd even notice. Thanksgiving morning, I arrived early to help set up. The house looked the same as always: fading wallpaper, overstuffed couches, and that faint smell of lemon cleaner. Paige was already there, lounging on the living room couch in overpriced athleisure, scrolling through her phone. "Wow, you look dressed," she commented, her eyes lingering on my outfit. I'd opted for a simple black dress and a vintage brooch that had once belonged to a Russian duchess. I'd just authenticated it for a private client, and it felt like a little inside joke wearing a piece worth more than her entire closet. I smiled. "Thanks. You too." She frowned, clearly not catching the sarcasm, and went back to her phone. The caterers arrived right on time, setting up trays of perfectly arranged hors d'oeuvres and carving stations in the dining room. Mom kept hovering, wringing her hands like she expected them to start charging by the breath. "Lily, this is too much," she whispered as I adjusted the floral centerpiece. "You really didn't have to go all out." I just smiled. Consider it my contribution to the family. Dinner was a surreal experience. My relatives, who usually complained about dry turkey and burnt stuffing, were practically moaning over the truffle risotto. Paige, between taking selfies with her plate, kept muttering about how store-bought the food tasted, completely oblivious to the fact that each dish probably cost more than her monthly credit card bill. After the main course, I slipped upstairs to my old bedroom to check on an online auction. One of my top clients was bidding on a rare Art Deco bracelet, and I wanted to be ready in case I needed to verify the piece for him. I sat at my childhood desk, my laptop screen glowing as the numbers ticked up. I was so absorbed in the live bids that I didn't hear Paige barging into the room. "Ugh, can I borrow your phone charger?" she whined, not even bothering to knock. Before I could close my laptop, she spotted my screen. Her eyes narrowed as she took in the tabs: auction house dashboards, jewelry appraisal databases, and a spreadsheet showing my quarterly profits. She froze, her mouth hanging open. What is this?" I felt my stomach drop. This was not how I wanted the reveal to happen. Paige grabbed my laptop before I could stop her and stormed downstairs. I scrambled after her, heart racing, my mind already spinning with damage control strategies. She burst into the dining room where my parents and extended family were still chatting over dessert. "Everyone, you have to see this," Paige announced, spinning my laptop around so the entire table could see my business dashboard, complete with a live feed of my account balance just north of $11 million. The room went dead silent. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock by the fireplace. Mom's eyes bulged. "Lily, what is this?" I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and stepped forward. "It's my business. I own one of the largest jewelry authentication companies in the Midwest." Paige's face turned a deep shade of red, a mix of shock, embarrassment, and something else: envy. Dad's jaw tightened. "You have millions, and you let us struggle with your sister's tuition and medical bills." I felt the years of neglect, the constant dismissals, the overlooked achievements bubbling up inside me. I met his glare with a calm I didn't know I had. "I've been sending you money for years, Dad. Thousands every month. I just didn't see the point in mentioning it." Mom clutched her chest like I'd just confessed to a crime. "How could you keep this from us? We're your family." I felt a bitter smile creep onto my lips. "Family? You mean the people who shipped me off every time I sneezed as a kid? The ones who missed every single one of my achievements because Paige had a flute recital or a head cold? The family that never once asked me about my life while I was building this company from nothing?" Silence. My uncle awkwardly cleared his throat. My aunt suddenly found her wine glass fascinating. Paige just stood there, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. I left my parents' house that night with a strange mix of emotions. Relief, anger, and a twisted sense of satisfaction swirled together like a potent cocktail. For years I'd stayed quiet, let them assume I was struggling, that I needed their pity. Now the mask was off and I could breathe. By the time I got home, my phone was already lighting up like a pinball machine. I ignored it, poured myself a glass of wine, and sank into my velvet armchair. I took a deep breath, letting the tension bleed out of my shoulders. Then the text messages started. Mom, 7:42 p.m. How could you humiliate us like that? Page 8:15 p.m. I deserve a share of what you've made. You owe this family. Dad, 8:30 p.m. We need to talk. You have a responsibility to us. I put my phone on silent, tossed it onto the couch, and let myself sink deeper into the quiet. The next morning, I woke up to a storm on social media. Paige had taken to Instagram, posting a dramatic black and white selfie with a caption that read, "Betrayed by those closest to me. Family should mean something." The comment section was a dumpster fire of distant relatives, childhood friends, and even a few of Paige's sorority sisters chiming in about the importance of family loyalty and supporting each other. I couldn't help but laugh. Support. The same family that hadn't bothered to check in on me once while I was building my business from scratch. The same parents who missed every significant milestone in my life. Then the phone call started. Aunt Linda, who I hadn't spoken to in months, left a rambling voicemail about how family is all we have and how I should remember my roots. Uncle Jeff sent a lengthy email full of thinly veiled guilt trips, reminding me that I wouldn't be where I am without my parents' sacrifices. Like the countless times they ignored my achievements or dismissed my dreams because Paige needed their attention, the irony was almost too much. For a week I held my ground, ignored their messages, blocked a few particularly aggressive cousins, and threw myself into work. My business was booming and I had no intention of letting my family's drama drag me down. Then came the knock on my office door. I looked up from my desk to see Jenny, my assistant, looking a bit pale. "Your family is here," she whispered, her eyes wide. I felt my stomach drop. I walked into the lobby to find my parents and Paige sitting on the velvet couches, looking completely out of place among the polished marble floors and glass display cases. Paige had that tight-lipped expression she always got when she was about to make a scene, while my parents looked like they'd just walked into a courtroom. "Lily!" Mom started standing up and trying to reach for my hand. I took a step back, keeping my expression neutral. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice steady but cold. Dad straightened his tie, clearly trying to regain some authority. "We need to talk. As a family." I crossed my arms. "You mean the family that's been blowing up my phone for a week? The one that never gave a damn about what I was doing until they realized I had money?" Paige scoffed, her perfectly manicured nails tapping impatiently on her designer purse. "Oh, don't be so dramatic, Lily. We're just here to work this out." I bit back a laugh. "Work what out exactly?" Mom stepped forward, her eyes already glistening. "We just feel like you owe us some consideration. We raised you. We made sacrifices for you." I felt my jaw clench. Sacrifices like what? Missing my talent shows, ignoring my perfect SAT scores, or sending me off to grandma's every time Paige had a sniffle. The room fell silent. My father's face turned a deep shade of red and Paige shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting around the room like she was looking for an exit. "Don't be ungrateful," Dad snapped, his voice rising. "We put a roof over your head, paid for your education." I cut him off. "I paid for my own education. I got scholarships, worked part-time, and flipped jewelry just to cover my expenses. You didn't pay a cent." Mom's eyes widened, and for a brief moment I saw real fear in them. They'd never bothered to check. They'd just assumed that I was another struggling millennial buried in student loans and credit card debt. Paige, clearly uncomfortable with the tension, tried to smooth things over. "Look, Lily, we're not here to fight. We just think it's only fair that you share some of what you've made. You know, to help the family." I felt something inside me snap. The nerve of her, the entitlement, the absolute blindness to the years of neglect I'd endured. "I've been helping," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "I've been sending you thousands of dollars every month for years. Not that any of you bothered to ask where it came from." Mom's hand flew to her mouth and Dad took a step back like I'd just slapped him. Paige's jaw dropped, and for a moment she looked genuinely speechless. "I've paid for your medical bills, your mortgage, even some of Paige's tuition." I continued, my words coming out like rapid fire. And you still treated me like the family disappointment. The silence that followed was deafening. I could practically see the gears turning in their heads, the slow dawning realization that I was no longer the quiet, invisible daughter they could ignore. Finally, Dad cleared his throat, his voice trembling. We didn't know." I felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat. "Of course you didn't. You never cared enough to ask." I turned on my heel, nodding to Jenny to show them out. As I walked back to my office, I heard my mother start to cry, her sobs echoing down the marble hallway. Jenny met my eyes as I passed her desk. "Should I call security?" she whispered. I paused, took a deep breath, and shook my head. No, let them leave on their own. As the door clicked shut behind them, I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. For the first time, I truly felt free. Story 2. You ever get the feeling someone's entire life mission is to outshine you? That was my stepsister Bianca. From the day our parents merged homes when I was 11 and she was 13, she made it her full-time job to remind me I'd never be the favorite. We weren't close. Scratch that, we weren't even cordial. I was the background kid, the one with the sensible haircut, hand-me-down clothes, and a knack for staying out of the way. Bianca, on the other hand, golden child. Cheerleader, prom queen, and the kind of pretty that makes adults coo and kids jealous. And my parents, they lapped up everything she did, like it was the second coming of Christ in a pink tutu. I should have seen it coming, really. When I got engaged to Marcus, a kind, grounded, emotionally mature human being, rare, I know, I hesitated before telling my family. I hadn't lived with them in years, hadn't even spoken regularly since moving out after landing my job in UI/UX design. But I figured, new chapter, clean slate. Maybe they'd surprise me. They didn't. When I shared the news over dinner, nervously fumbling with my napkin, my mom barely lifted her head. My stepdad let out a half-hearted, "Congrats," eyes still on the game. "Bianca." She raised an eyebrow and said, "Oh, I didn't think people still did weddings that small." That was the moment I knew something was off. But I chalked it up to her usual passive digs. I didn't know she had a full plan in motion. I picked a wedding date, October 7th. Autumn in upstate New York is magic, and we wanted something intimate. Just family, close friends, a little fire pit, and a rented lodge surrounded by burnt orange leaves. 3 weeks after I sent out the save the dates, my mom called. "Bianca's getting married too," she said, voice bubbling with pride I'd never received. And guess what? Same day. I didn't respond right away. Thought maybe I misheard her. Same day. "Wait," I said. "October 7th. "Oh, honey, it's just a coincidence, and yours is small anyway, right?" The audacity floored me. Bianca knew the date. She had the invite. This wasn't a coincidence, it was strategic sabotage. And my parents, they were fine with it. They'd attend hers, of course. "It's going to be big," my mom said, like that justified everything. For a few days I was numb, then furious, then numb again. But eventually I did what I always did, swallowed the hurt and moved forward. Marcus and I restructured our plans. No longer a small wedding. We decided to expand. I invited friends from college, work buddies, some of Marcus's extended family, even my old art mentor. Then came the final straw. I stopped by my mom's place 2 months before the wedding just to pick up an old photo album. Bianca was there with her fiancé Connor, a corporate lawyer who exuded condescension like it was cologne. The moment I stepped in, he said, "So you're the infamous little sister. Didn't know someone with a GED could land a fiancé like Marcus." For the record, I have a bachelor's from a top design school, but I stayed quiet. Arguing would have been futile. Then Bianca chimed in, "Oh, by the way, our weddings are officially on the same day. Just figured we'd beat you to the punch." "Same venue?" I asked, voice dry. "Oh, please," she laughed. "Yours is basically a backyard picnic." They were wrong. I'd upgraded venues after my in-laws offered help, a beautiful estate with indoor and outdoor space, complete with a lake view and space for 150 guests. But I didn't tell them that. I let them believe what they wanted. Bianca made one more move. She somehow got her hands on my wedding dress during a supposed visit to my mom's. A few days later, I found it with deliberate tears around the waist and back seams. No apology, just a passive text from Bianca, "Hope you weren't too attached to that one." That was the final nail. I confronted my mom, who simply said, "Don't exaggerate. It's just a dress, you're being dramatic." I was done. I told Marcus I didn't want any of them at the wedding. Not one. Not even as a courtesy invite. He squeezed my hand and said, "Then we move forward, just us and everyone who actually gives a damn." So we did. The day came, October 7th. The venue was glowing warm lights, strung between trees, golden leaves falling like confetti. My new dress fit like a dream. My friends cried when they saw me walk down the aisle. Marcus looked like he might pass out from happiness. Everything was perfect, until the reception. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her Bianca, in her own wedding gown, Connor beside her, face pale. I walked up to them calm as ever. "What are you doing here?" I asked. Her smile faltered. I just wanted to see what you were up to. Your reception looked, busy." "Busy," I echoed. "You mean better attended?" Turns out many of the guests she invited from Connor's firm had RSVP'd yes to my wedding. Why? Because Connor's firm was owned by Marcus's father. And Marcus's father had made it clear where his employees should show up. Bianca blinked. "Wait, Marcus's dad is president and CEO." I said, watching her mouth open and close like a goldfish. Connor's face drained of color. Just then, Marcus's dad stepped forward. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said. "Cool as ever. I heard your wedding was today too. Interesting choice." Bianca stammered. "We didn't know." "Oh, I think you did," he said, then turned to Connor. "And I heard you were quite vocal about marrying down." "Bad luck, son." Connor tried to speak, failed, turned around and walked straight out. Bianca followed, veil fluttering behind her like a surrender flag. I stood there, glass of champagne in hand, surrounded by real family people who chose to be there, who loved me for me. And as the music picked up again and the dancing resumed, I felt something shift. Not just in the room, in me. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was seen. I wish I could say Bianca's little crash and burn at my wedding was the end of it. That she went home, stared at herself in the mirror, and realized, maybe I've been awful. But life isn't a movie, and people like her don't get redemption arcs, they get louder. Let me rewind a bit. After that whole wedding fiasco, I figured I'd at least get some space. A breather. You know, maybe a year or two before, my family tried crawling back, pretending they hadn't completely betrayed me. Instead, they showed up at my house 3 days later uninvited. It was a Tuesday. I still had dried flower petals in my hair and half my wedding gifts unopened when I heard the knock. My mom, stepdad, and Bianca all lined up like some twisted apology squad. Except none of them looked sorry. Bianca had the nerve to wear white. "You humiliated us," my mother said before I even opened the door all the way. Not congratulations, not "you looked beautiful," just "you humiliated us." I laughed. Actually laughed. Not out of joy, more like that slightly unhinged giggle people make when they're 1 inch from losing it. You showed up to my wedding, crashed it in your own gown, and now you're mad that it didn't turn out the way you wanted. Bianca rolled her eyes. "It wasn't about you." That line did something to me. I don't know what snapped inside, but it was like years of being ignored, years of being the second choice, the quiet one, the nothing, finally decided it had enough. "I'm done," I said. "Don't be dramatic," my mom replied. Classic. "No, really." "Done," I repeated. "You missed my childhood, you missed my wedding. You don't get to show up now like any of this is about you." They stood there speechless, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the smaller person in the room. Let me take you back so you understand just how deep this mess runs. I used to think if I just worked hard enough, they'd love me the way they loved Bianca. When I was 12, I taught myself to bake because Bianca mentioned once that our mom's chocolate cake was dry. I spent 6 weekends perfecting the recipe. The day I finally nailed it, I waited for my parents to come home from work. My mom took one bite and said, "That's cute." Did Bianca help? Bianca hadn't even been in the house. But it didn't matter. If it was good, it must have been hers. Years later, when I got into my university on scholarship, one of the top design programs in the state, I came home certificate in hand, hoping maybe this time I'd finally done something worth noticing. Bianca had just gotten a nose job. Guess who got a dinner party? I don't tell you this to make you feel sorry for me. I'm long past wanting that. I just want you to understand that by the time I said I'm done, I really meant it. After the wedding, things started to shift. Marcus and I moved into a townhouse his parents helped us buy. I took on a senior design role at my firm, started mentoring interns, launched a side hustle doing custom branding for nonprofits. I'd never felt more secure, more capable, or more free. My in-laws, saints. They sent me just because flowers. They called to ask about my day. They listened. Not out of obligation, but because they cared. Meanwhile, Bianca's life, it unraveled like a badly knitted scarf. Turns out when your father-in-law owns the company and you spend your wedding day insulting his family, things don't go so great afterward. Connor got demoted twice, then reassigned to some quiet corner of compliance where no one returns your emails and HR forgets your name. By winter, rumors swirled that they weren't even living together anymore. I kept my distance. I wasn't checking her socials or gossiping with mutual friends, but the updates found me anyway. People talk, and sometimes karma doesn't whisper, it screams. Then one day in March my phone buzzed, unknown number. I let it ring. A minute later a text, "Please talk to me, it's Bianca." I stared at the message for a full 5 minutes, not because I was debating whether to answer, just amazed at the audacity. She sent another, "You won. Okay, can we just start over?" Start over. That's the thing about people like Bianca. They think apologies are resets. That if they just say the magic words, we'll pretend the years of cruelty were nothing more than a bad dream. I didn't answer. Instead, I screenshotted the texts and saved them in a folder I labeled "just in case." Not for revenge, not for leverage, just for closure evidence that I wasn't crazy, that she knew exactly what she did. That night I told Marcus. "She's trying to reach out," I said. He looked at me for a long moment, then said, "You know, you don't owe her a response, right?" God, I love that man. 2 weeks later my mom called. She hadn't reached out since the wedding. Her voice was tired, not sad, just depleted. "Bianca's staying with us," she said. "Connor left. She's been crying every night." I waited for the follow-up, for the part where she'd say, "And I realized we were wrong," but that never came. Instead, she needs her sister. I don't know what it was about that sentence that made me laugh again. Maybe because it was the first time my mother ever referred to me as Bianca's sister, like it was an actual bond and not just a genetic inconvenience. "I'm not her sister," I said quietly. "I was her decoy, her comparison, her plan B." "That's not true." "No." "Then tell me one memory, just one where you stood up for me, where you chose me." Silence. That was the last time I spoke to her. Sometimes people ask me if I miss them. I think about it sometimes. Like when I see old family photos or smell perfume that reminds me of our house growing up. But do I miss them? No, I miss the idea of what they should have been. Big difference. 1 year after our wedding, Marcus and I sat in the backyard watching the sunset tangled up in a hammock. He handed me a mug of cider, kissed my forehead, and said, "You ever think about reaching out again?" I smiled, no, and I meant it. There's this myth people love to push, especially online, that forgiveness equals healing, that you can't move forward unless you make peace with your past. But here's what I've learned: sometimes peace comes from letting the door stay closed. Bianca tried to ruin the best day of my life. My parents helped her do it, and somehow that led me to a life I wouldn't trade for anything. Funny how that works. After that last call with my mother, I stopped looking back. I didn't send Christmas cards, didn't check their socials, didn't ask mutual friends for updates. It was like setting down a bag I didn't realize I'd been carrying my whole life, heavy, stuffed with guilt, shame, and the kind of sadness you don't have words for until much later. Marcus understood. He never pressured me to make things right or be the bigger person. That's the thing about healing, it doesn't need an audience, just space. But the universe, or whatever you want to call it, has a way of sending updates whether you want them or not. It was late spring when one of Bianca's old friends, Tara, reached out to me. We hadn't talked in years, but her message was short. "Hope you're good. I thought you should see this." Attached was a blurry video from some local event, looked like a charity auction or networking mixer. In it, Bianca stood near a table with half a glass of wine and a strained smile. She was laughing too loud, too forced, and alone. Connor was nowhere in sight. The video wasn't dramatic or humiliating, just sad. Like watching a star that doesn't know it's flickered out. I didn't feel satisfaction, just a strange stillness. She built her identity on being adored. But adoration doesn't last when people figure out the shine is just surface level. You can't keep playing the main character when no one wants to read your script. As for Connor, he was quietly pushed out of the firm a few months after our wedding. Marcus's dad didn't make a scene, just rearranged a few roles, reassigned a few accounts, and let the internal politics do the rest. Corporate karma doesn't come with fireworks. It's slow, precise, clean. The last I heard, Connor was consulting out of a co-working space 2 towns over, trying to pitch disruption strategies to startups that didn't want him. A guy who once looked at me like I was gum on his shoe, now selling deck templates to people who drink oat milk lattes and don't remember his name 5 minutes after the meeting ends. My parents, well, they turned on Bianca pretty fast after the wedding fallout. Not publicly, they're not the confrontational type, but the energy shifted. Less golden child, more golden liability. Apparently, after blowing $80K on a wedding that never got fully off the ground, and with Connor pulling away, Bianca moved back in with them. My mom started venting to cousins, claiming she sacrificed everything for her daughters and got nothing in return. Funny how that works when your definition of sacrifice is ignored one kid to boost the other's ego. At some point, they cut her off financially. I guess when you pour all your chips into one basket and it flops, you look for someone to blame. And since I was already gone, they only had Bianca left to turn on. I got this secondhand from my Aunt Denise, one of the only relatives who ever treated me like a person. She called me one night just to chat and eventually said, "They're saying you stole the spotlight on Bianca's big day." I paused. "You mean my wedding?" She sighed. "I know, I just wanted you to hear it from someone who doesn't believe that crap." We talked a while. She told me she always saw the favoritism, always thought it was unfair. She just didn't know what to say back then. I appreciated it, but I told her the truth. You don't owe me an apology for surviving a storm someone else caused. So here's the epilogue. Marcus and I just got back from our anniversary trip. Nothing flashy, just a cozy cabin, a stack of books and bad cell service. We hiked, we talked, we made chili in a cast iron pot and danced barefoot in the kitchen. There were no big speeches, no dramatic moments, just peace, the kind that settles into your bones when you stop performing for people who never clapped for you in the first place. I'm not angry anymore. I don't sit up at night wishing I'd said something sharper, colder, more cutting. That's not power, that's poison. Power is choosing silence when chaos knocks. Power is building something so solid that even when your past shows up in a cheap dress and fake apology, it can't shake the foundation. I saw Bianca once more by accident. It was fall again, almost a year after everything. I was grabbing coffee downtown, and there she was standing outside a boutique arguing with someone on the phone. Our eyes met. For a second, she looked like she might say something. She didn't. Neither did I. I just nodded, calm, polite, distant, and kept walking. And you know what? That walk away felt better than any revenge. No slam dunk insult, no mic drop moment, just the quiet, steady realization that I didn't need her to be a villain for me to finally feel free. She tried to ruin my wedding. She failed. She tried to dim my joy. It burned brighter. And my family, they had a choice to be part of something real or stay loyal to a lie. They chose the lie. So I chose myself. And now I live a life I built. A love I trust. A truth that doesn't need permission. That bridge behind me. I didn't burn it. They lit the match. I just never walked back across. Story 3. They say weddings bring families together. Mine tore it apart. I'm Riley. I'm 29, a research biologist working in Cambridge. My husband Alex is 30 and a clinical researcher at MIT. We've been together 6 years. We met over a broken centrifuge and a shared love for bad diner coffee. Our relationship was built on long nights in the lab, mutual respect, and way too many spreadsheets. Romantic, I know. We decided early on that we weren't going to blow our savings on one day. Between student loans and our modest salaries, we agreed that a simple wedding was enough as long as it felt like us. So we booked an old Unitarian church in Cambridge. Quiet, beautiful, with stained glass windows and ivy climbing the red brick outside. The kind of place where you could feel the history in the walls. The reception would be held at a cozy farm-to-table spot nearby with space for about 60 people. Nothing flashy, just friends, good food, and a bit of wine. We were happy with it. My parents, not so much. The trouble really began when my younger sister Ashley got engaged a few months before me. Ashley is the golden child. She always has been blonde, charming, effortlessly likable. She works in fashion PR and got engaged to James, a senior exec at a pharmaceutical company. His salary could eat ours for breakfast. From the moment she announced it, my parents lit up like it was the second coming. They immediately offered up most of their retirement fund for her wedding. They went all in black tie, dress code, designer dress fittings, imported orchids, a $500 per plate menu, the whole deal. When I brought up our plans, they laughed. Actually laughed. Riley, my mom said, shaking her head, "Don't worry, your wedding will be sweet. But the real celebration, that'll be Ashley's." And Ashley, she giggled and said, "If I had to get married in a church like that, I'd die of secondhand embarrassment." I'm not kidding. She said that, out loud. In front of everyone, holding a champagne flute. It stung. But I let it go. That's kind of been my thing since childhood, let it go. Move on, stay quiet. I didn't expect much from them. But deep down, I guess I still hoped they'd come. I gave them the date, sent a formal invite, reached out with updates. Radio silence. Then about a month before the wedding, I got a text from my mom. "We'll be busy with Ashley's event prep that weekend. Sorry, honey. Hope it goes well." I sat there staring at my phone. Not surprised, just tired. That night I told Alex. He was furious in the quiet way people get when they've seen you hurt too many times. Then we build this day with the people who love us. They made their choice. We'll make ours. And so we did. We planned everything with heart and intention. My best friend Mia helped design the flower arrangements. My coworkers pitched in with decorations. Alex's parents, who barely knew me at the start, treated me like their own daughter. They offered to cover the wine and desserts. "You're family now," his mom said. I wore a simple A-line dress and a lace veil that belonged to my grandmother. I didn't need diamonds. I just wanted to feel like myself. The morning of our wedding was unreal. Early May in Cambridge, the trees glowing green sunlight catching on the stained glass. I stepped into that church surrounded by people who chose to be there. 60 seats filled with people who showed up out of love. My lab mates, our grad school friends, Alex's family, even my freshman year TA who I'd once cried to about flunking organic chemistry. I walked down the aisle and saw Alex waiting, tears in his eyes. That look alone made everything worth it. He said, "This isn't the wedding people expected, but it's the one I dreamed of. We may not have millions, but we have this. And I wouldn't trade it for anything." I don't cry easily, but that got me. The reception afterward was like something out of a good dream. Warm food, laughter, and clinking glasses under soft light. It wasn't fancy, but it was real. Midway through dinner, one of our guests, Dr. Wallace, a big name in pharma research and someone Alex had been networking with, walked over. He congratulated us, complimented the sincerity of the ceremony, and then casually asked, "By the way, is your family here?" I didn't see them. I paused. No, they had other commitments. He frowned slightly. "I see." He didn't say more, but something shifted in his expression, like the wheels were turning. Then came dessert. Boston cream pie and a pear tart made by Alex's aunt, no less. That's when Dr. Wallace's phone buzzed. He checked it, blinked, and showed me the screen. Ashley's Instagram. A photo of her draped in designer gowns surrounded by shopping bags. Caption, "Skip the embarrassment of my sister's wedding. Who wants to sit in a musty church when you could be prepping for a real celebration?" The kicker. My mom had commented, "That's right, sweetheart. Yours is the one that matters." I felt everyone's eyes on me. The room got quiet. I didn't cry, I didn't rage, I just nodded. Looks like they made their feelings pretty clear. Dr. Wallace stood polite but clearly irritated. "Excuse me, I need to make a call." He stepped outside, and that was the start of everything unraveling. Apparently, Ashley's fiancé James was in talks for a major business deal with Dr. Wallace's firm, a $50 million one. And Dr. Wallace, he doesn't mess with unethical people. Turns out publicly mocking your own family over class and status doesn't go down well in that circle. Phones started ringing. Guests looked uncomfortable. Some executives joined a video call right there at the venue. Within the hour, that business deal was off the table. Meanwhile, I was still at my wedding eating pie. Alex leaned over, eyes wide. Is this real life?" "Feels like it," I whispered. Then the front doors opened. My parents and Ashley came in looking like ghosts. Makeup streaked, phone in hand, panic in their eyes. Ashley saw me and rushed over. "Riley, please, you have to help. James is livid. His company's backing out. It's chaos." Mom added, "Do something, fix it." I stared at them. For once I didn't flinch, didn't fold. "You ignored my wedding. You mocked it. You called it embarrassing. Now you're here because your world is crumbling." Ashley opened her mouth, then closed it. I raised my glass and said, "Take a seat if you like, but this isn't your stage." They sat. Not because they wanted to, but because they had nowhere else to go. And that was how my modest, embarrassing little wedding turned into the most unforgettable night of their lives. Not because of what we lost, but because of everything we had. It's strange how quiet power feels. Not the kind that yells or demands attention. The kind that shows up in silence when you speak your truth and everyone else has no choice but to listen. That's how I felt the moment my family sat down at my wedding reception, like unwanted extras in a scene they weren't cast for. They looked out of place and they knew it. My mom kept glancing around nervously, her lipstick smudged at the corners. My dad, normally a stone wall, just stared at his glass of water like it held all the answers. Ashley, once the center of every room, suddenly seemed small. Her fancy dress looked less like a fashion statement and more like armor she wasn't sure how to wear anymore. I didn't say much, I didn't need to. The room had already seen enough. Dr. Wallace eventually came back inside, sat down quietly with Alex, and gave him a slight nod. "Handled," he said. That was all. But the look on Ashley's face when she realized the deal was officially gone, it said more than any apology ever could. After the dessert plates were cleared and the wine glasses began to empty, the mood lightened. Laughter returned. Our friends danced. My lab supervisor attempted the cha-cha with one of Alex's uncles. At one point, Mia pulled me aside and whispered, "This is still your day. Don't let them ruin a second of it." And she was right. So I smiled, held Alex's hand tighter, and let joy find me again. But my family, they sat in the back, mostly silent. Not because they were mourning the loss of a party, they were realizing, maybe for the first time, that I wasn't the background character they thought I was. After the wedding, everything changed. Quickly. News of the incident spread fast in James's industry. Word travels even faster when people have screenshots. Ashley deleted the post the next morning, but it didn't matter. Enough people had seen it. By the end of the week, James's company had pulled him from several projects. His promotion was put on hold indefinitely. A month later, their engagement was quietly called off. No announcement, no explanation, just a change in Facebook relationship status and Ashley disappearing from the spotlight she'd always lived in. My parents, once so proud of her, went from defending her to distancing themselves. Funny how loyalty bends when your reputation's on the line. Alex and I, we got back to our lives. Work-home research deadlines. We even managed a short trip to AITA that summer. Just the two of us, a small cabin, and the ocean at our doorstep. It felt clean, like breathing fresh air after being underground for too long. I started noticing the difference in myself, too. I spoke up more at work, took lead on projects. When my PI asked me to present our paper at an upcoming conference, I didn't hesitate. That old voice in my head, the one that told me I wasn't the shiny one, was quieter now. Turns out living in someone else's shadow only works when you keep pretending there's no light inside you. A few months later, my parents asked to meet. I agreed. I wasn't angry anymore, just done expecting anything from them. We sat on a bench outside the Harvard Science Center. Fall had settled in, leaves crunching under shoes, the air sharp with that almost winter smell. We didn't know it would go that far. My mom started. My dad added, "We just thought Ashley needed support. We didn't mean to." To hurt me, I asked. "Because you did, repeatedly, for years." They both went quiet. "I don't hate you," I said after a long pause, "but I'm not going to shrink to make room for someone else's spotlight anymore." My dad looked down at his hands. My mom's eyes welled up. "You were always the strong one," she said softly. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't believe her, but because it was the first time I realized I didn't need her to say it anymore. Ashley moved out of Boston by the end of that year. She got a job at a florist shop in a smaller city up north. She still posts on Instagram, but it's different now. More grounded, less gloss. Last month she sent me a letter. Handwritten. It said, "I thought success meant being admired. That attention equaled worth. But the quiet life. It's not so bad. The flowers don't care if I'm wearing last season's shoes. They just need water, light, and patience. Turns out I do too." I sat with that for a while, not because I forgave her completely, but because I finally saw the part of her that was human, messy, flawed, real, just like me. My parents still come around, though it's less about obligation now and more about effort. They babysit our daughter sometimes. Yes, Alex and I had a little girl 2 years after the wedding. Emma. Wild curls, loud laugh, curious as hell. She already asks more questions than I have answers for. And when she runs around our tiny garden, dirt on her knees, shouting about worms and planets, I smile. Because I know this is the life I wanted. Not because it's perfect, but because it's honest. Some nights when the house is quiet and the dishes are done, I think about that wedding. About the girl I was walking down the aisle in that lace veil and secondhand shoes. How small I felt, how brave I had to be. She had no idea the world would fall apart and fall back together again. But she showed up anyway. And that's everything. Time has a way of softening sharp edges. It doesn't erase the past, but it gives you distance. And sometimes from that distance, you can finally see the full picture. Not just the pain, but also the growth. The way broken things mend in unexpected places. It's been 5 years since that wedding. 5 years since the day my family showed up too late asking for help after ignoring my joy. 5 years since Ashley lost her engagement, her reputation, and if I'm being honest, a version of herself that wasn't built to last. So much has changed since then. Alex and I are still in Cambridge. Still in love, still eating too much takeout, still debating the best Star Trek captain. It's Janeway, obviously. Our careers have grown in ways I never expected. Alex now leads a research team developing breakthrough autoimmune treatments. I earned tenure last spring and now mentor undergrads the same way my old lab advisor once mentored me. But the biggest change, Emma. Our daughter is now 3. She's all sunshine and fire, her laugh loud enough to shake the walls. She calls my mom Grandma and my dad Pop. And weirdly enough, they adore her. Genuinely. It's like they saved all the softness they never gave me and poured it into her. At first it made me angry. I won't lie about that. Watching them dote on Emma, knowing how cold they were to me, it opened old wounds I thought I'd already closed. But slowly I realized something. They were trying. Imperfectly, clumsily, but still they were trying. And I had a choice: hold onto the old hurt or give space for something new to grow. I chose the second. Ashley lives upstate now. She never remarried. Never went back to PR or fashion. She manages a little flower shop that smells like lavender and fresh-cut stems. She writes letters, sometimes real ones, with stamps and ink and tiny doodles in the corners. Last fall, she sent me one that said, "The other day, a customer said my bouquet felt like kindness. I thought of you. I'm sorry for all of it, especially for not seeing you until the world made me look." We've seen each other a few times since then. Always somewhere quiet. A coffee shop, a park bench, once the church in Cambridge where I got married. She asked if we could walk the grounds. I said yes. As we sat by the garden, she ran her hand across the stone steps and said softly, "You were always braver than me." I didn't answer. I just looked at the flowers. They'd bloomed again, like they do every spring. My parents changed too. After their retirement plans crumbled, they sold the big house and downsized to a modest condo in Watertown. It's nothing fancy, just a little balcony, a few houseplants, a worn-out couch that my dad insists is vintage. But they smile more now. They cook dinner when we visit. They ask questions not out of politeness, but because they're actually curious. And that's the thing, isn't it? Healing isn't always about dramatic moments. Sometimes it's just slow afternoons and shared meals. Asking, "How was your day?" and actually listening to the answer. Holding your granddaughter's hand while she picks dandelions and declares them magic stars. That's what our new family looks like. Not perfect, but real. Every May we still meet for lunch near the church where Alex and I got married. The same place they once called embarrassing. We don't talk about that day much anymore. Not directly, but it lingers in the air like a shadow we've all chosen to stop running from. Emma always runs straight to the garden. She knows every corner of it now. Where the bees like to hide, which tree drops the pinkest petals, and how the sunlight hits the glass windows just right in the afternoon. Sometimes I watch her and think, this is the celebration. Not a wedding with a guest list or a dress with a price tag, but a life built with care. A family rebuilt with effort, and love that doesn't need to be flashy to be true. Dr. Wallace still sends holiday cards. Every year without fail. Sometimes with updates about his new research, sometimes just a simple, "thinking of you." I heard from a colleague that after our wedding, he started pushing for stronger ethics training in his company. Personal accountability, he called it. Apparently, my sister's Instagram post kicked off more than just a scandal. It started a shift. Not just in my family, but in the people watching from the outside. Funny how small things ripple like that. Last week, as I tucked Emma into bed, she asked Mama who was at your wedding. I smiled. A lot of people who loved us very much, like Grandma and Auntie Ash. I paused. "No," I said gently, "not back then, but they came around." She thought about it for a moment, then nodded. Sometimes people get there late, but it's okay if they still come. And just like that, she fell asleep. That's what forgiveness looks like, I think. Not forgetting, not pretending it didn't happen, just letting people arrive in their own time. So here we are, still meeting at the same table, still choosing each other even after all the mess. The fancy wedding never happened. The luxury resort gone. The champagne towers and celebrity gowns all dust now. But the girl who was once laughed at for her cheap wedding, she's here, she's whole. She's surrounded by love that didn't need money to be real. And when I look across the table and see my daughter twirling in the garden and my sister trimming flowers she now understands and my parents setting down dishes with care, I realize this is the real celebration.